Shedinja's an interesting Pokemon for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's what you refer to as a gimmick Pokemon, in the sense that there's a certain restriction or style of play associated with it. Other gimmick Pokemon would include the likes of Smeargle, who can only copy an opponent's moves, and Wobbuffet, who can only attack via counter moves. In Shedinja's case, it's gimmicks, that's plural. First, they come in the form of its unique ability, Wonder Guard. Wonder Guard means that Shedinja can only be damaged by super effective moves. And if we look at the type effectiveness, we can see that Shedinja, as a bug ghost type, is weak to flying, rock, ghost, fire, and dark. Every other move type just won't affect. However, weather effects such as hail and sandstorm will affect Shedinja. Shedinja's second gimmick is its HP. It starts with 1 HP, and that's all the HP Shedinja will ever have. And if we now take a look at its stats, it only really excels in its physical attack. Why its second highest stat is then defense, who knows? But what it comes down to is if Shedinja gets hit, then it faints. But before we get into the game proper and Shedinja's moves, it's worth going over my slightly modified rule set for what I'd usually use. Number 1, we could only use Shedinja in battle. It's a solo run after all, but we can capture other Pokemon for HM butler purposes. Number 2 is that we can't use items in battle, held items are fine. Number 3, this isn't a minimum battles run. Those are the types of runs I usually do, but it's literally impossible to complete this as a minimum battles run, so we can feel free to level up if needed. Number 4 is no save scumming, meaning that we can't save in the middle of battles for a better result. However, during the Elite Four, I had to save before Lance for my own sanity, and I'll explain why later. With the rules out of the way, we could look at Shedinja's rather paltry moveset and learn set. In Gen 4, we start off with Scratch, Harden for some reason, and Leech Life. Then, the next attacking move it will learn is Shadow Sneak at level 38. And even then, it's only 40 damage. After that, it's Shadow Ball at level 59. It really got done dirty in this gen, even after it was introduced just in Gen 3. However, the blows softened just a little bit by the TMs that it can learn. For us, moves like Protect, Sunny Day, Return, Dig, Shadow Ball, Shadow Claw, etc. will definitely be useful. Unfortunately, a number of other decent moves are locked behind the Battle Frontier, which is something I tend to avoid in these runs, just because of how grindy it is. So, starting the game. With all that out of the way, we can actually get into things. We use the spot reserved for Chikorita to insert Shedinja, because Totodile and Cyndaquil have the greatest chance of being a pain for us later on because of their moveset. Nature-wise, I've gone for an Adamant Nature, which boosts attack but lowers special attack, because our best moves will all be physical. Obviously, to get some favourable stats for Shedinja, I had to reset quite a few times. From here, the game continues as normal and isn't really worth talking about until we reach the Elder at Sprout Tower. In OG Gold Silver, this isn't mandatory like in the remakes, but we're trying to get as much XP as possible, so it makes sense to fight every battle that we can. Up until this point, the majority of moves that opponents have used or have learned are normal type. What we can see in the battle with the Elder is, despite sending out the Bellsprout first, he'll immediately switch to his Hoo-Hoo, and when it has a chance, it'll use Peck, which is a one-hit KO. I tried for a couple more battles until I just decided to level up a couple of levels to see if that'll change my luck. When we go back at level 11, not a ton has changed really, and it's only really luck or idiocy from the trainer that its Hoo-Hoo doesn't use Peck, which allows us to get past it and then defeat the rest of his Bellsprout army, because they don't have a move that can affect us. After that, we can now try Faulkner at Violet City Gym. However, there are a couple of trainers that we can fight before tackling him. The first, Birdkeeper Abe, has Spearow. This thing has Peck and it's not afraid to use it. I ultimately decide to just skip him and instead face Birdkeeper Rod, who has a couple of Pidgey that can't damage us. I then go back and deal with Abe before trying my luck with Faulkner. Faulkner has a Pidgey and a Pidgeotto. The former isn't a problem because it doesn't know a move that can hurt us. The roadblock comes in the latter because Pidgeotto knows Gust. Every time we go up against it, it'll consistently one-hit KO us. So after several unsuccessful attempts, there is a slight light at the end of the tunnel. When Shedinja reaches level 14, it can learn the move Fury Swipes. To actually win this battle, you do unfortunately require a bit of luck. The Pidgeotto will always outspeed us, so it's not good defeating the Pidgey first. However, because Pidgey doesn't have a move that can affect us, Faulkner will often swap in for the Pidgeotto. When that happens, we need to have already selected Fury Swipes. Then, not only do we need that roll of Fury Swipes to hit 5 times, but we need a crit thrown in there too. If that happens, then we can defeat the Pidgeotto. Then the Pidgey's pretty trivial. Moving onwards, there was something in the back of my mind when starting this run, a kind of niggling realization that I was hoping wouldn't come true, but in the end it did. It doesn't occur when we reach Azalea Town, well, not right away, Slowpoke well and the rockets aren't a problem, but instead of facing Bugsy right away, I wanted to see how my luck would fare with our rival. We're level 19 right now, and its first Pokemon is a level 14 Ghastly. I go for Leech Life because it's the only move I can damage Ghastly with, and as you'd expect, it's not very effective. All Ghastly has to do then is just use Lick and we're gone. Instead, I choose to focus on Bugsy to get some more XP. In a lot of other runs, especially minimum battles, Scyther can be pretty devastating because of its combo of Focus Energy, U-Turn and Quick Attack. However, its arsenal is pretty ineffective against our Bug Ghost typing, so a Pokemon like Scyther can't do anything. This allows us to simply keep hammering Scratch to get through all of Bugsy's Pokemon. Now this is the point I feared. Simply put, I can't defeat the rival in my current state. I won't bore you with details, but I had to level up a lot, like over 10 levels. Because if you recall Shedinja's Learn set from earlier, it next learns a move that can technically affect a Ghost Pokemon at level 31, Confuse Ray. Now it's down to luck really, and to get to the lofty heights of level 31, I had to do a lot of grinding. Bellsprout are the only ones that give better XP, in addition to the attack EVs. All in all, it took maybe an hour or so at increased speed to pump Shedinja's levels. With that said, we're still relying on luck to get past the Ghastly. When we start the battle, we hit it with Confuse Ray, then we need Ghastly to hit itself in Confusion twice, while we use Leech Life, which is doing more damage now until it's knocked out. For the Quilava, it's best to use Fury Swipes because it has Ember, which is a one-hit KO. For the Zubat, Fury Swipes only takes 2 hits to knock it out, and after that giant wall, it was pretty smooth. With that all over, we can finally continue with the game to Whitney. However, one thing worth pointing out, which I tend to forget, is that the rival appearing by the exit of town is triggered by either battling Bugsy or dealing with the Rockets and Slowpoke well. I can never remember. But anyway, it may have been smarter to battle the Pokemon in Ilex Forest instead, but we'll never know. So Whitney in a Clefairy-shaped gym, it's pretty much a breeze. The trainers don't pose a threat and neither does Whitney herself. Much like Faulkner, her first Pokemon doesn't have a move that can affect Shedinja. Metronome luck notwithstanding, Miltank however does have rollout. When Whitney swaps into it, I've lined up a return, a move which you can get from the Goldenrod department store on Sundays, and with the number of battles we've had with Shedinja, that thing loves us. Return does a bunch of damage, nearly one hit KO in the Miltank. Instead of rollout, Whitney uses a super potion, practically fully healing Miltank. Another return leaves it with a tiny portion of health, however we outspeed and can knock it out. Then when Clefairy comes out, one return can finish it off. The next significant battle is with the rival in Burn Tower. Much like he did before, he leads with the Ghastly, and at first I attempt the same combo of Confusion and Leech Life, but it's ultimately pointless. I quickly decide to just teach Shedinja Shadow Claw instead, which you can find just to the east of Ecritique. With this, the Ghastly is trivial. For Quilava, I go for another Shadow Claw, and it's down in 1. For Zubat, I use Return instead. Finally, for the Magnemite, while I don't have an effective move against it, given my high level, Shadow Claw does the job just fine. We have a pretty good matchup for Morty in his gym. While we can clear out the army of Ghastly and Haunter in our path, we can become a little unstuck when a Pokemon like Haunter has Sucker Punch. So you just need to be a little cautious before fighting them. But with all that said, Morty himself would have been an issue if we were at a lower level where his Pokemon could outspeed us. As things stand, because we have Shadow Claw, every one of his Pokemon are 1-hit KOs. Over the seas in Cyanwood, we can find Shook. By the time we face his Primeape and Poliwrath, we're at level 42. Even at this level, Return is not a 1-hit KO, but it puts Primeape in healing range, meaning that we get to attack after the heal. Even when Poliwrath comes out and is able to put us to sleep, it has no moves that are actually effective against us, so we simply need to wait until we can eventually attack. Yeah, so after a bit of a rocky start, we've gotten into quite a comfortable position with Shedinja. Price is next, and this is the first time that we see a weather effect come into play. When Piloswine comes into battle, its burst instinct is to use Hail, which we don't have a counter for. Obviously, this will knock us out a turn later, so we need to avoid that. We do have a way to mitigate that, however. Confuse Ray. While the Seal and Dugong will go down in a single hit from Return, Piloswine won't. So when it's sent out, we go for Confuse Ray, Piloswine hits itself in Confusion, we then use Shadow Claw. While a Citrus Berry heals Piloswine, it hits itself in Confusion again, then Shadow Claw can finish it off. Like Price, Jasmine can be more annoying than difficult. While her Magnemites fall easily to dig, which we picked up from the park, her Steelix has Rock Throw. Again, we're relying on the same Confusion strats or hoping that Rock Throw misses while we dig. By doing this, we can avoid Jasmine healing her Steelix because of its berry. Then, when it falls, Dig is a one-shot on the remaining Magnemite. Claire, however, is a different matter entirely. Her first Pokemon, the Gyarados, annoyingly has Intimidate, which cuts our attack. It also has Bite. Now, we're at level 57 by the time we face her. A crit Shadow Claw, even with an Intimidate, does have the ability to one-shot Gyarados. However, if that happens, Claire will then send out her Dragonair, specifically the one with Fire Blast. And that hits. After a few more tries, because the range is so tiny to KO the Dragonair with Return, it made sense to just go and level up with the trainers just south of Blackthorn until we're at level 60. In a successful battle, rather than relying on the crit chance from Shadow Claw, we return to our old Confusion strats. With this, when Gyarados comes out, we hope it hits itself in Confusion, while we use Return to knock it out. For Dragonair, because we've eliminated the chance of Return being in range, we can now knock it out in one. The same goes for the second Dragonair. However, Claire's final Pokemon Kingdra is a little frustrating. Because it has no move that can penetrate Wonder Guard, it continues to spam Smokescreen until it runs out of them. While we're doing decent damage with Return, we find ourselves in a position where we can barely connect with any of our attacks. Not only that, but Kingdra has a berry, along with Claire using a Hyper Potion. However, it's a battle of perseverance, and we win out in the end when we can finally connect with Return. To put things into perspective, I beat Claire at level 60. And I wouldn't be able to get past Lance until I was over level 90. It wasn't so much the trainers before Lance, but Lance himself. Before we get to the successful run, we require a bit of context to explain how we were gated by each of the trainers we faced. Let's start with Will. We're effective against his Pokemon. Executor can be annoying because of a move like Reflect, but it's not too bad. The second Xatu has both Ominous Wind and Aerial Ace. At lower levels, unless you're critting with Shadow Claw or using Confuse Ray, then you aren't getting past it. And I wanted to be at a level where Pokemon like Executor and the second Xatu weren't a range anymore. If memory serves, making that happen required me to be in the 70s, and that's Will. For Koga, you have more annoying Pokemon. His Ariados is always first, but that can't hit us, so Koga will always switch into Venomoth. While it does have Gust, it's a pretty brittle Pokemon, so Shadow Claw was usually fine. However, next was always be the Crobat, which has Wing Attack, and Crobat is fast. So fast that I had to calculate at what level, given my current speed, I had the possibility of outspeeding it. After some time, I was able to do that. As for the Muck, it likes to use Minimize, which he'll always get off because we have to use Dig against it. However, that's just a waiting game. The rest of Koga's Pokemon aren't worth mentioning. Now, Bruno. All his Pokemon, save the Hitmontop, have the potential to hit us. Ideally, they need to be one-hit KOs. With the levels we've gained in our pursuit to outspeed Crobat, we were doing alright in the beginning. The problem here was mainly the Machamp. We simply weren't doing enough damage originally, leaving the Champ to use Rock Slide and KOs. Aside from that, it was just a numbers game. Next up is Karen. Her Pokemon have a few annoying traits. The Umbreon, who tends to wall in lower level runs, isn't too bad. It's the likes of Murkrow, which has Sucker Punch, Gengar, which has Lick, and the Houndoom, which has Dark Pulse, Crunch, and Flamethrower. Basically, for the latter, we have to outspeed it. This meant our levels had to increase. But say you level up and you manage to get to Lance when you're level 91. It should be rather trivial then, right? Nope. So let's see what a successful run looks like up to Lance first. Okay, Will's up. We're level 89. When Will sends out his first Xatu, he immediately switches into the next that can damage us. Shadow Claw is no longer a range and is super effective, so it goes down. OG Xatu comes out next. Shadow Claw. Next is Executor and another Shadow Claw. When Slowbro comes out, we can use another one. Same for Jinx, and that's Will done. When we face Koga, he starts with the Ariados, but we'll swap it out, this time for Crobat. Shadow Claw can then take that out. Then for Venomoth, we use Return. Ariados gets the same treatment when it comes out. Fortress is only annoying because it spams Protect. Defying logic, it even managed to get 3 Protects off before failing at the 4th. For Muck, instead of worrying about Minimize, I just use Shadow Claw and it's a one-shot. And that's Koga. For Bruno, he'll always swap out the Hitmontop into Pokemon like Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan. This time, it's Hitmonchan. Regardless of which Pokemon is sent out, we can use Shadow Claw, then when Onix comes out, another Shadow Claw. For Machamp, because we've eliminated the range, we can use Shadow Claw again. It's then just a case of using Return for the rest. With Karen, Return is fine for Umbreon. For Murkrow, I just stuck to Hit and hope it wouldn't use Sucker Punch, which worked well enough the majority of the time. For Houndoom, we can simply Dig. And then for Gengar, we can use Shadow Claw. Finally, for the Vileplume, it just takes a return. So we've got to a pretty consistent place with Elite Four, but that'll change with Lance. Like with Claire, with Gyarados being first, we're always going to get hit with Intimidate. At lower levels, that was absolutely crippling. Combine that with Pokemon like Aerodactyl coming out next, we get hit with Aerial Ace and it was just over. However, upon reaching a higher level, we were able to effectively outspeed the Aerodactyl and the Intimidate didn't hit as hard. At least for those two Pokemon. When Charizard came out, with the Intimidate, it was never a one-shot, meaning that Charizard could then use Fire Fang, Air Slash or Shadow Claw to defeat us. What about a White Herb, you might ask? It's just too much of a pain to get it from the Battle Frontier, not to mention we couldn't even access the Battle Frontier if we wanted. All we could do in this situation was use our faithful Confuse Ray and hope. More often than not, Charizard will not hit itself in Confusion, and after trying the run to the Elite Four multiple times and stumbling so often, I just decided to save before Lance. Even in the instances where Charizard hits itself in Confusion, Shadow Claw is still not enough to KO it. It had to hit itself in Confusion for a second time. And even if we got past Charizard, when the level 50 Dragonite came out, Shadow Claw would do half, and it would then get healed by its berry. Of course, it would then use Fire Blast, and we were knocked out. And finally, in what I thought would be an awful battle, we somehow got a break. Things kick off as normal, Lance sends out Gyarados, I go for Confuse Ray on the Gyarados, and Lance switches into Aerodactyl. The Confuse Ray hits. Thankfully, because I outspeed, I can use Shadow Claw, but we're already off to a bad start. For Charizard, I rely on Confuse Ray, Charizard hits itself, and I've since switched to Return, which can actually finish it off. For the level 50 Dragonite, I have taught Shedinja Hyper Beam for some reason, I use it, it's awful. Dragonite uses Fire Blast and misses. I have to recharge, Dragonite then uses another Fire Blast, another miss. I use Shadow Claw, and it defeats it. Gyarados comes out again, and we get another Intimidate. I use Shadow Claw hoping for a crit, which I don't get, and then Gyarados uses Ice Fang for some reason, which is ineffective. This means I can then use another Shadow Claw. Finally, for the first level 49 Dragonite, I use Shadow Claw again, and this time I get the crit. With it knocked out, there's just one more Pokemon remaining. Lance's last Dragonite is the most ineffective, and while I use Shadow Claw, which doesn't do as much as I'd like, it then uses Thunder Wave. Then, when Lance uses a full restore on the Dragonite, I can use 2 returns to end the battle. Definitely not the smoothest victory I've ever had, but I am not going through that. Now we're the champion, which means that Kanto has opened up to us. Honestly, at our level, there really isn't much to talk about with the gym leaders here because they're all trivial. Before we take on Red, only Blue is worth covering. As has been said, Blue has a great, varied team, and by the time we reach him, we're at level 100. The most dangerous Pokemon on his team are the Rhydon and the Machamp, who both have Stone Edge, Pidgeot, which has Air Slash, and the Arcanine with Flare Blitz. Like other trainers before, Blue's not afraid to switch out to a Pokemon that can damage us. In our first battle, he swaps out for the Machamp. We've not been hit with Intimidate yet, which means that Shadow Claw can one-shot it. However, when Arcanine does come out and we get hit with Intimidate, our dig is no longer a one-shot. Arcanine can then use Flare Blitz, and it's over. Much like Lance, our victory over Blue was not particularly graceful. When Exeggutor comes out, I'm not really expecting the switch this time, so I just go for Shadow Claw. Arcanine's sent out and it tanks the Shadow Claw, plus we get the Intimidate. I go for another Shadow Claw, but then Blue switches again into Pidgeot. Obviously Ghost won't work on it, and I'm not confident my next attack would KO it, so I settle on Confuse Ray. Pidgeot then hits itself in Confusion, and when I go for Return, it's not a KO, allowing it to heal with a berry. Pidgeot then hits itself again in Confusion, and we use Return. Arcanine is out, and we're hit with Intimidate once more. However, I'm able to go for Dig, which, when it hits, does finish it off. Rhydon is up next, and there's no way I can defeat it in one, so I opt to use Confuse Ray. I get it to hit itself in Confusion twice before using Dig, and we're still not close to knocking it out. Blue then uses a full restore, and we're back to square one. Rhydon then uses Stone Edge, missing, so that we can then use Dig to eventually defeat it. For Machamp, which has Stone Edge, I hit and hope with Shadow Claw, which crits to knock it out. Finally, we have the Exeggutor. Despite our Intimidates, we can finish it, leaving us with just the Gyarados. However, it has no moves that can affect us, leaving us to take our time with Shadow Claw without worrying. With Blue defeated, the last thing standing in our way is Red. It goes without saying that he has a formidable team, What works in our favour is that only a few of his Pokemon can actually damage us, namely the Charizard with its fire and flying moves, as well as the Snorlax which has Crunch and Shadow Ball. Another point not working in our favour is the fact that Hail is present throughout the battle, and Hail will KO us in one turn after the start. This means we can't even begin to think about winning this battle without Sunny Day. Sunny Day can be obtained from the Goldenrod radio tower from a woman inside, and you only get one of these, so if you've used it or overwritten it, this battle just can't be won. Red will always start the battle with Pikachu, and then he'll always switch it out for the Snorlax. While this does allow us to set up Sunny Day, we can't knock the Snorlax out in just one hit. It's pretty much impossible. We have progressed from our big brain Confuse Ray strats to Swagger, however, and by using this, we can get the Snorlax to hit itself with Confusion. However, to get Snorlax to cooperate is insanely difficult. I tried again and again and again, but could never seem to get the Snorlax to hit itself twice. However, in one instance, instead of sending out the Snorlax, Red swapped into his Charizard instead. And I'm treated to another bit of devastating information. We cannot outspeed the Charizard. We're already at level 100. It can use Flare Blitz and immediately KO us. So what now? Well, like in a previous HeartGold run with Lugia, it's our mother that comes to the rescue. Whereas in that run, she sent us a berry that can mitigate one super effective electric move, she can also send a rare item, the Focus Sash. If your Pokemon's holding this, it allows it to withstand a one-hit KO move, or an attack that would have knocked you out from full health. With this, we just might be able to survive the battle. However, the Focus Sash is not a get-out-of-jail-free card by any means, it just means we can withstand one attack. And in the instances where we don't have it activate, it won't save us from a Pokemon like Charizard's second Flare Blitz. So we're still leaning heavily on Swagger to see us through the battle. The Focus Sash is just a bit of insurance. So is this battle possible? As usual, Red starts with Pikachu. We set up with Sunny Day in anticipation of either Charizard or Snorlax coming out, the latter of which is more preferable. Snorlax comes out, we then use Swagger, it hits itself in Confusion once, then I misclick and use Swagger again, but Snorlax hits itself in Confusion again. And then I decide to just roll with it and use Swagger again in anticipation of it snapping out of Confusion, which it does. Finally, after hitting itself a third time, I can just use Return. Charizard is next, and I know it's going first, so I use Swagger. The Focus Sash saves us, so I can then use it. I go for Shadow Claw, and Charizard hits itself in Confusion. Shadow Claw, having done good damage, gets a push from Charizard hitting itself again, allowing us to finish it off. All Red has left now is a bunch of Pokemon that can't do a great deal to us. While Venusaur can use Sleep Powder, it's really just a waiting game until we're in a position to finish it off. It's the same story for the Pikachu. For Lapras, while bulkier, it still can't do anything, so we just hammer away until it's finished. Blastoise is Red's final Pokemon, again, not much it can do, so I just go with Swagger and Return and leave it at that. And that's Red. Well, it was an interesting run with Shedinja, if nothing else. While I didn't really like using moves like Confuse Ray or Swagger, there were instances where we just have to rely on more luck than we already had. And I don't really like leveling up past problems, but with the limited moveset we have, we're not left with much choice. While the remakes do update some of the movesets your opponents have, I think the later versions would probably be more of a challenge because more thought is put into their moves and abilities. But hey, maybe you could have made the run even easier. Feel free to let me know. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, let me know. And if you want to like or subscribe, go for it. Until next time, have a good one.